Nutty Putty Cave. At just 400 feet deep, Nutty Putty is far from the deepest cave in the world. But what it lacks in depth, it makes up for with its incredibly narrow passages. And in 2009, one of these passages would claim the life of a young father. This is that story. Utah, United States. About 55 miles southwest of Salt Lake City, on the western shore of Utah Lake, there's a small mountain range. This region is known as Utah County, and like much of the area, these mountains are arid, rocky, and mostly treeless. But beneath these mountains, there are limestone cave systems carved out by underground water over thousands of years. One of these caves is known locally as Nutty Putty. The cave's name comes from the texture of the limestone inside. Some sections are soft, sticky, and clay-like, just like peanut butter. That's why Nutty Putty, peanut butter. The cave was first discovered in 1960 by a group of students from Brigham Young University. At the time, it appeared to be just a small hole, but once they entered, they discovered a labyrinth of narrow tunnels and passages. Over the next 40 years, Nutty Putty became a popular spot for amateur and experienced cavers in Utah. The cave was especially ideal for beginner-level cavers because there were no dangerous vertical drops and it was relatively safe. But relatively safe doesn't always mean safe. The cave's total length is approximately 1,500 feet, and its maximum depth is just 400 feet. For context, that's about the height of a 14-story building. Compared to Veryovkina Cave's 7,257 feet, Nutty Putty is small. But Nutty Putty has a unique characteristic: incredibly narrow passages. Some tunnels in the cave are so narrow that you can only get through by turning your shoulders and crawling. In some places, you're moving using just your chest and stomach, almost like a snake. And some passages are so tight that if you enter at the wrong angle, you can get completely stuck. These types of narrow passages are known as squeezes in the caving world, and Nutty Putty Cave is full of squeezes. One of the cave's most famous passages is called the Birth Canal. The name comes from exactly what you'd expect. It's as narrow and tight as a birth canal. To get through this passage, you have to lie on your back, extend your arms above your head, and push with your feet, while using your chest and back to crawl. The tunnel is so narrow that you can't turn your head. The limestone grips you from all sides. For most people, the birth canal is scary, but exciting. After crawling a few feet, you emerge into a larger chamber and relax. But for some, this tunnel is a nightmare. In 2004, the first serious incident occurred at Nutty Putty. A young man got stuck in the birth canal, and it took 3 hours to rescue him. By 2009, there had been approximately 100 rescue operations in the cave. Most were minor incidents, people panicking, getting lost, or getting slightly stuck. But no one had ever died. Until November 24th, 2009. John Edward Jones was 26 years old. He lived in Stansbury Park, Utah. He was married to his wife Emily, and they had a 13-month-old daughter. Emily was also pregnant with their second child. John was a medical student, studying at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. He was intelligent, ambitious, and loved his family deeply. Friends and family described him as kind, fun-loving, and always ready to help others. John was also an experienced caver. He had grown up in Utah and had been cave exploring with his brothers since his youth. He had been to Nutty Putty Cave several times before and knew the cave well. He even loved it. The narrow passages and challenges excited him. In November 2009, John came to Utah for Thanksgiving holiday to visit family. Since he was at medical school in Virginia, he rarely had the opportunity to see his family and old friends. On Monday, November 23rd, while talking with his brother Josh, they reminisced about old times. Josh said he hadn't been to Nutty Putty in years. Neither had John. They both suddenly felt nostalgic. "What do you think?" John said. "Should we go tomorrow? Just like old times." Josh smiled. "Sure, but this time I know the way. I'll take you to the birth canal." John laughed. "I've never been there before," Josh joked. "Then prepare yourself for a surprise." On Tuesday evening, November 24th, they made their plans. John, Josh, and several friends and family members, 9 people in total. They would go to the cave at night. This wasn't unusual for cavers. In fact, going into caves at night was better in some ways because the cave was always dark anyway. Day or night made no difference. Emily was worried. Since she was pregnant, she couldn't go, and knowing John was going with family made her a bit uneasy. But John reassured her. "It'll just be a few hours. I'll be back by morning." Emily nodded and hugged him. "Be careful." "I'm always careful," John said. Around 8 p.m., the group set off for Nutty Putty Cave. The cave entrance is in the mountains west of Utah Lake, in a fairly remote location. They arrived at the cave around 8 p.m. It was cold. In November in Utah, nighttime temperatures can drop below freezing. But inside the cave, it was relatively warm, about 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. The 9 people prepared their equipment. Each had a headlamp, helmet, gloves, and knee pads. They also brought water, small snacks, and communication devices. John was very excited. He hadn't been to Nutty Putty in years, and reminiscing about old times with his brother made him happy. Around 8:30 p.m., the group entered the cave. The first few tunnels were fairly easy, wide passages and level floors. The group was talking, laughing, and having fun. Some were entering a cave for the first time, so everything was new and exciting. Josh was leading the way. "Do you want to go to the birth canal?" The group had mixed reactions. Some were excited, some were worried. They had heard about the narrow passages. John smiled. "I'm going. Who else is coming?" A few more people decided to join. The others would wait in a larger chamber. Around 9:30 p.m., John, Josh, and a few others headed toward the birth canal. Reached the birth canal, they had to go through several narrow tunnels and passages. Josh was going first, John behind him. Their headlamps illuminated the cave walls. The limestone was in shades of brown, white, and gray. Some places were wet, some were dry. Finally, Josh stopped. "Here it is," he said, "the birth canal." John looked ahead. He saw a narrow tunnel, maybe 20 to 24 inches wide. The tunnel went upward at a slight angle. "Are you serious?" John said, but he was smiling. He loved the challenge. "You have to lie on your back," Josh said, "arms above your head, then push up with your feet." The group took turns entering the tunnel. One by one, they lay on their backs, extended their arms, and crawled through the tunnel. It was narrow, tight, and a bit scary. But after a few feet, they emerged into a larger chamber. John waited his turn. He watched his friends go through the tunnel. Some struggled a bit, but they all made it. Finally, it was John's turn. He approached the tunnel, lay on his back, and extended his arms above his head. Then he started pushing with his feet. The limestone pressed against his chest, back, and both sides of his head. Breathing was difficult, but not impossible. After moving a few feet, he stopped. The tunnel seemed to be getting even narrower. He couldn't turn his head. His chest felt squeezed. For a moment he felt panic, but then he took a deep breath and relaxed. Stay calm, he thought. Just move a little further. He pushed again with his feet and moved a few more inches, and then the tunnel continued, but he couldn't hear his friends' voices. Strange. Josh, he called out. I don't know where I am. Josh's voice came from far away. Are you still in the tunnel? You're going too slow. John frowned. Something was wrong. The birth canal shouldn't be this long. And then he realized he had entered the wrong tunnel. The birth canal went upward, but the tunnel he was in was going downward, and it was getting narrower. John tried not to panic. I need to go back, he thought. He tried to push backward, but he couldn't move. The tunnel had narrowed so much that his body was stuck. He tried again. He pushed his shoulders back, bent his feet. Nothing. He couldn't move. And then he noticed something. He was upside down. The tunnel sloped downward, and he was stuck in the tunnel upside down. His head was down, his feet were up. His heart started racing. Josh, he yelled. Josh, I'm stuck. Josh's voice came from far away. What? What did you say? I'm stuck, John yelled. I went into the wrong tunnel. I'm upside down. A moment of silence, then Josh's voice, this time closer. Stay calm, I'm coming. John tried to breathe, but his chest was so compressed by the limestone that taking a deep breath was almost impossible. Because he was upside down, blood was flowing to his head. There was a throbbing sensation in his head. Stay calm, he told himself. You're just a little stuck. They'll get you out. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. The tunnel he was stuck in was known as Bob's Push. It was one of the narrowest and most dangerous tunnels in the cave. The tunnel descended at a 45-degree angle, was only 10 to 12 inches wide, and was 2 to 3 feet deep. And John was stuck in this tunnel upside down. When Josh and the others reached John, they understood the situation. Josh looked at the tunnel entrance. He could see John's feet, but that was all. The rest of the tunnel was so narrow that John's body was completely inside. John, Josh called, can you hear me? Yes, John's voice sounded muffled. I'm stuck, Josh. I can't move. Josh tried to enter the tunnel, but even he barely fit. To reach John, he would need to go at least 10 to 12 feet further, but the tunnel was so narrow it seemed impossible. Did you try pulling back? Josh asked. I tried. I can't move. My head is down. Josh assessed the situation. This was serious. John wasn't just stuck. He was stuck upside down. And every passing minute, blood would continue flowing to his head. It was approximately 11:45 p.m. Josh turned to the group. We need to call for help. Right now. At midnight, the first emergency call was made. They reached the Utah County Sheriff's Office. The situation was explained. A man was stuck upside down in Nutty Putty Cave. Around 1 a.m., the first rescue team arrived at the cave. Utah County Sheriff Sergeant Susie Mottola went inside to assess the situation. When she reached John, she understood how serious it was. John was still conscious, but speaking in a very weak voice. Please, he said, get me out of here. My wife is pregnant. I have a daughter. Susie tried to reassure him. "We're going to get you out, John. We just need a little time." But inside, Susie was worried. John's position was an almost impossible rescue situation. Upside down, in a narrow tunnel, 2 to 3 feet deep. The rescue team began making a plan. The first idea was to grab John by his feet and pull him back. But this was very dangerous. If they pulled too hard, John's bones could break or his spine could be damaged, and the tunnel was so narrow there wasn't enough room to pull him back. Around 2 a.m., more rescue personnel arrived. Over 100 people in total. Firefighters, paramedics, cave rescue specialists. Everyone was thinking the same thing. This was the worst situation they had ever seen at Nutty Putty. At 3 a.m., the rescue team decided to try a new plan, a pulley system. The idea was simple. They would attach a harness and rope to John's feet, then set up a pulley system on the cave ceiling and pull the rope to lift John up. But doing this wasn't easy. First, they needed to attach the rope to John's feet. This meant someone had to crawl through the narrow tunnel to reach John. One man from the rescue team volunteered. His name is unknown, but he was a hero that day. The man entered the narrow tunnel and started crawling toward John. After a few feet, he reached John's feet, but the tunnel was so narrow he could barely breathe. He tried to tie the rope to John's feet with his hands. Minutes passed. He was covered in sweat, struggling to breathe. Finally, he managed to tie the rope. When he came back out, he was gasping for breath. "It's ready," he said. The rescue team began setting up the pulley system. They placed steel stakes and bolts into the cave ceiling, then mounted the pulleys. The rope went through the pulley system and was attached to John's feet. Around 6 a.m., everything was ready. "Start pulling," said the team leader. Slowly, they began pulling the rope. At first, nothing happened. John was still stuck. They pulled harder. And then, John moved. Just a few inches, but he was moving. Upward. "Keep going," the team leader shouted. They pulled more. John moved a few more inches up. But then a problem occurred. John cried out in pain. His feet and legs hurt badly from the pulling force of the rope. Also, after being upside down for so long, being suddenly pulled up was having a very sudden effect on his body. "Stop!" John yelled. "It hurts too much." The team stopped. But then, it got worse. One of the bolts holding the pulley system broke. A sudden crack sound. Then the bolt came out of the cave ceiling. John suddenly fell back into the tunnel, and this time he slid deeper. Now he was stuck worse. His head was in an even narrower part of the tunnel, and his body was more tightly compressed. John screamed, but his scream was weak, breathless. The rescue team was in shock. The plan had failed, and now John was in an even worse position. Around 10 a.m., John started speaking again, but this time his voice was very weak. "Susie," he said, "tell Emily. Tell her I love her." Susie started crying. "No, John, don't give up. We're going to get you out." But John was exhausted. He had been upside down for more than 11 hours. His heart was working too hard. Blood had rushed to his head. His lungs were compressed. His body couldn't take it anymore. "My wife is pregnant," John said. "Take care of her and my daughter." "Take care of yourself," Susie said. "You need to hold on." John tried to say something else, but his words came out unintelligible. In the afternoon, the rescue team continued trying different plans. They tried using a drill to break the rock around the tunnel. But the drill was too loud, and breaking the rock could cause the entire tunnel to collapse. They tried using oil to slide John out. But the tunnel was so narrow that even oil didn't work. They tried breaking up and widening the rock around John, but this was too dangerous and would take too much time. Around 3 p.m., John's voice stopped. The rescue team kept calling to him. "John, can you hear us?" No answer. A few minutes later, he spoke again, but his voice was very, very weak. "I'm so tired," he said. "You have to hold on, John," Susie said. "Your family is waiting for you." John didn't respond. Around 5 p.m., John's pulse started dropping. The paramedics were watching the monitor. His heart rate was slowing. "Come on, John," Susie said. "You have to hold on." But John didn't respond. At 5:45 p.m., the doctors decided there was nothing more they could do. November 25th, 2009, Wednesday, around midnight. John Edward Jones died in Nutty Putty Cave, stuck upside down in a narrow tunnel after 28 hours. Cause of death: cardiac arrest and asphyxiation. Being upside down for so long caused his heart to overwork and his lungs to not get enough air. Retrieving John's body was impossible. The tunnel was so narrow and John was stuck so deep that removing his body would require completely destroying the tunnel. But this could cause the entire cave to collapse and endanger the rescue team's lives. His family and authorities had to make a difficult decision: leave John's body in the cave. On November 26, 2009, the entrance to Nutty Putty Cave was permanently sealed. Heavy concrete blocks were placed at the cave entrance, and it was sealed shut. John Edward Jones was buried in Nutty Putty Cave. The cave is now his grave. After John's death, his wife Emily was devastated. When John died, Emily was 7 months pregnant. A few months later, she gave birth to their second child, a son. She named him John, to keep her husband's name alive. Emily mourned John's death for years, but over time, she moved on with her life. A few years later, she remarried and now lives a happy life. But she never forgot John. "John was an amazing man," Emily said in an interview. "He was an amazing father, an amazing husband. And I miss every moment I spent with him. But I know he's in heaven and watching over me." John's family was also deeply affected. His brother Josh blamed himself for years. "I wish we hadn't gone to the cave that night," he said. "I wish I had shown him the way better." But the family eventually forgave Josh. It was an accident. No one was to blame. At the entrance to Nutty Putty Cave, there is now a memorial. It bears John's name, his birth and death dates, and a message for his family. John Edward Jones, age 26, beloved husband, father, and son, at peace in the hands of God. After the cave was closed, the caving community in Utah reviewed safety rules. They agreed that more precautions needed to be taken before entering narrow and dangerous caves like Nutty Putty. Some people said the cave should be completely destroyed, but most people agreed that the cave should remain as a memorial to John's memory. Today, the entrance to Nutty Putty Cave remains sealed. No one can enter, and John Edward Jones will remain there forever. The Nutty Putty Cave tragedy taught the caving community some important lessons. First, always make a plan and stick to it. John entered the wrong tunnel because he lost his direction in the dark. If he had been more careful, this might not have happened. Second, be very careful when going through narrow passages. If you don't feel comfortable entering a squeeze, don't enter. Going back is always an option. Third, never go alone. John was with a group, but he still got stuck. If he had been alone, no one would have found him. Fourth, never enter a narrow tunnel upside down. The main reason for John's death was being stuck upside down. If he had been stuck in a normal position, his chances of survival might have been higher. Nutty Putty Cave is now closed, but its story lives on as a cautionary tale for cavers worldwide. John Edward Jones died at age 26. He was a beloved husband, father, and son. He was deeply loved and missed by his family and friends, and now forever at peace beneath the Utah mountains in Nutty Putty Cave.